say because it was a meadow, they also found evidence that maybe there had been burns that were human-made, the way they burned it off to keep it a meadow. Can't prove that they did that, but these areas, gee, was that a natural fire or was it human-caused? But it was in the time periods of when they were using it. Oh, pretty cool. So, first European settlers get here around the mid-1700s. They're being pushed out of the flatlands because there's not enough land down there. They come up here and they see this beautiful meadow. And they go back down and say, hey, I got a great place for your cattle in the summer. Bring them up here, let them graze up here. They'll be healthier, they'll eat better. Bring them back down in the fall, take them to market. And so this place became a cattle grazing area, but people had to live up here to take care of the cattle, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But there were orchards up here. The meadow, when the park was created, 1930 era, 1926 was when it was authorized. 1935 was when all the land had finally been purchased that the state of Virginia had to give to the federal government so there could be a Shenandoah National Park. During that time, there was estimated to be 1,000 acres of meadow here. And you wonder why, well, if there's 1,000 acres of meadow, by the way, why do they call it Big Meadows with an S? Because back in the mid-1700s, this land pretty much belonged to Lord Fairfax. The King of England had said, yeah, that's your land. And then Lord Fairfax parceled it out or kept it or whatever. And there's a phrase in one of his documents saying his lordship's meadowlands, and with an S on the end. So that tells us there were more than one meadow up here, interconnected. What we know is, down at Milam Gap, there's been an orchard there in the past, apple orchard, but that was part of the meadow. Fisher's Gap, a mile and a half that way, was part of the meadow. That's a 3-mile span. Those trees you see on the ridge over there were not there. So there was a lot of meadow. So Park Service comes in and says, okay, we now have a park. This park was created to provide a natural national park in the east to match the natural national parks in the west. All right? You hear that word natural keep popping in? So they said, okay, let's let nature reclaim this land that's been used by humans, the whole park area. Some of it was forested, some of it was not. About 14% was open land of the whole park land. The rest of it was forested, but not virgin forest. Very little virgin forest left that had never been cut by man. So the forests have been used, then they grew back, forests have been used, so it's been a use like that. But this area, this meadow, had been a meadow all that time, and so the park says, well, we ought to preserve that. Let's preserve this area you can see right across from the Big Meadows complex. This visitor center wasn't here yet, but the lodge was being built and all that. And they said, let's preserve this 136 acres or so that you can see from the road, and we'll mow it twice a year. And they mowed twice a year. So it's pretty much a lawn. They did that for about 40 years. And then someone, this is the government we're talking about, someone says, we can't spend that much money on that meadow. We're supposed to be a natural park. Remember? Remember that? Let's just leave it alone and see what happens. So along comes 1999. And they look at that and they say, huh, this is not a meadow anymore. There's bushes this high. There's trees starting to come in. If you walk the trails that used to be trails, you got blueberry bushes brushing both shoulders as you push through. Should we have kept it a meadow? And they went out and started looking at what had been growing here and what is still growing here, hadn't died off yet. And they found rare plants out there that live in that meadow environment. So maybe we ought to keep it a meadow. So here's a picture. It's really hard for the group this large to see, but at the top half is a picture of the meadow in 1999. The bottom half is after 10 years of maintaining the meadow. A different plan this time. If you just mow and mow and mow and mow, some plants will never be able to survive. Blueberry bushes, in order to reproduce, need a second year of growth on a stalk. They don't put out blossoms on their first year. So if you mow them down every year, they don't reproduce. So I said, let's do it differently. We're going to take a plan, and we're going to break the meadow up into 3 parts. The eastern third, the central third, and the western third. And the Rapidan Fire Road is the divider over there. This trail that we're going to walk down right beside that evergreen tree is the divider between the eastern and central. So they have broken up into thirds. And then they discover, well, wait a minute, that wetland down there doesn't need maintaining. It's going to maintain itself because it's so wet down there that the things that we're trying to stop won't grow there. We can leave that alone. So that's the 4th third. Then they said, you know what? The second Civilian Conservation Corps camp in the National Park Service in 1933 was built right over there on that end of the meadow. Wouldn't it be nice if we could find out something about that? And James Madison University came up and they did some test holes and they found where every building was at that camp. They had been torn down and erased, but they found the archaeological evidence of where they were. So we're going to maintain that area for the public to understand that camp. And we've put up signs and markers showing where the buildings were, and now we mow that section deliberately so people can walk back there easier. And we don't mow the area that was the buildings. Well, I'm calling this a sequester, and they're not mowing as much over there this year. So we have 5 thirds. This picture shows the breakdown of the meadow and what the different sections are. And their intent is to burn 1/3 of the major 3, mow 1/3 of the major 3, the other major third is they leave it alone, fallow. Then the next year rotate them. So every 3 years any one area would get burned, mowed, and left fallow. Well, why both burning and mowing in different years? The burning does a wonderful job of keeping a lot of the shrubs down, blueberries and so forth. Doesn't kill them, it knocks them down, they have to start over again. But the black locust tree is called a pioneer tree. It can grow in bright sunlight, grow up, create shade, and now trees like oaks and hickories can get started in that shade, grow up, and over a period of time you've had the natural succession of a forest taking over a meadow. And black locust loves fire. They burn it, it grows faster. So they got to mow that. So that's the reason for the sequence of all that. So if you're going to have fire in the National Park Service, you have to do it in a way that meets a prescription. It's called a prescribed fire. All the conditions have to be right before you light anything. The amount of moisture in the air, the amount of moisture in the fuel, the wind, the temperature, the staff available to control that fire, all those things have to be right, and others. For the last several years, our prescription has been tossed out the window. We haven't been able to burn because it's either been too wet or too dry or some other thing, so we haven't had the burns. This year, we're planning to have a burn in late summer.